My season just ended and I was trying to think of what kind of video I could make when nobody is really playing on the server anymore, and I figured it had been a little while since I had done a metagame overview, at least a PvP metagame overview. So in this video we'll talk about the current PvP metagame for good factions as of March 2023. So if you want to know which commanders, in my opinion, you should be investing in or building to counter, this will be a good video for you. Let's get into it. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into great detail on builds, equipment, army compositions, and that kind of stuff for each of these commanders. For all, or hopefully most of all of these, I'll have complete commander guides uploaded elsewhere, so go check those out if you want. We're going to go T1, T2, then T3 commander, so we will start things off with Dwalin. Dwalin, in my opinion at this point, is the undisputed top T1 good faction commander, and is very likely the number 1 or number 2 T1 commander in the game overall, him or Khaldun. Because he's a T1 commander, he's an excellent choice for free-to-play players and low spenders, and since this guy scales up to Respect 25 without a single wasted skill point, he is also extremely good for whales as well. And his commander matchup spread is just kind of amazing. You can pretty much send him in blind, and he's going to do quite well against most things, thanks to Warrior of the Lonely Mountain, allowing him as a glass cannon commander to actually combat Witch King, which is generally one of the worst matchups for glass cannon commanders. He can be built to kill large units if Mortar, T4s, or Mumas are a problem for you. And overall, he is just good at everything in this game. I've talked about it in other Dwalin videos before. He's pretty good at taking tiles, he can kill bosses, and he's a monster in PvP. Absolute excellent commander. The other pretty solid T1 good faction commander, in my opinion, although I am biased, is Faramir. And I will caveat this by saying that you do need Faramir's unique, the Ranger's Cape, in order for him to be viable in PvP. He's not super great at taking tiles, although with the unique item and the right troops, he can definitely do it. Where Faramir really suffers is somewhat twofold. First of all, his commander matchups can be quite polarizing. That is to say, when he hits the right target, he can do fantastically well. But when he runs into something like a Witch King, he's just going to get completely slapped. So if you're going to be using Faramir, you want to look for things like Gandalf the Grey, Gil-galad, Grima, anybody that relies on pursuit, he's going to be excellent against. And he can do pretty well against most glass cannons if you are geared out with the right army, just because he has such an incredible amount of burst damage. However, his fatal flaw, in my opinion, is that he doesn't really scale up to Respect 25 super well, which I never really thought I would be saying this, but we're like a year and a half into this game now. I never thought I would be referring to, oh, they don't scale to Respect 25 as a drawback for a commander. However, the Heir title, in my opinion, is one of the worst titles in the game. And the Gallant skill, which is what you'll likely take with the extra skill points after you're like Respect 18 or so, it just doesn't really do all that much. I mean, it helps a little bit, but it's not nearly as good as like Dwalin, who is just now ignoring armor magically because you're pushing him to Respect 25. And I'll give an honorable mention to the ever-reliable Eowyn. She's not a super-duper PvP powerhouse, but she's not bad at it either. She's not a super-duper amazing farmer, but she's not bad at it either. She is an all-around solid commander, so if you like using cavalry units, which is a really hot button issue these days, some people love them, some people hate them. So if you like using cavalry, I think she is certainly a fine pick for people that don't have an enormous budget. I do think she's pretty much outclassed by Theoden in just about every regard. She has a couple advantages, but overall, if you're a free-to-play player and low spender that loves cavalry, Eowyn will serve you well. If you are a dolphin or whale, you'd probably want to go for Theoden anyway. And that brings us to the good side T2s. Gimli, in my opinion, is the shining example of what's, I think, undisputedly the best good side T2 commander. A lot of this has to do with his unique item, Balance Axe, and giving him permanent Pursuit. Pursuit is an extremely powerful effect in this game. Gimli always has it from his axe, which frees up his accessory slot to use other things. And this guy just deals a bajillion damage. His fatal flaw is also that he doesn't scale extraordinarily well with respect once you start talking about extremely high levels of respect. but you don't have to take him to like R25 for him to perform extremely well. If you get his unique item, you have a fantastic weapon, one of the best weapons in the game, and you'll have more than enough skill points to max out all of his damage skills and start pushing 250 to 300,000 commander damage each fight. Extremely solid choice. Theoden is also still reliable in my opinion. He's fallen from grace somewhat from other PvP metagames, or the only other PvP metagame that I did. He's not quite as strong as he used to be, and I'm not really sure why. I really haven't been able to put my finger on why he's fallen from grace. Maybe he just doesn't scale with respect as well as other commanders do. Maybe the game is changing and the unit cost increase that went into effect a while ago, like maybe people are really starting to notice that now that servers are more and more competitive and farm is harder to get, therefore affording cavalry units constantly is more difficult. However, by no means is Theoden like a dumpster tier commander anymore. This guy can still put a ton of work in, and in my opinion, you can play him just off of fully refined purples. However, I would also make the argument that this guy, and this is kind of a crackpot conspiracy theory because I haven't tested it yet myself, I think he has an incredible full gold item build out there. I've theory crafted it myself. I don't know that I want to like make it super public. Not that it's like some rocket science thing or whatever. However, I've heard people say that one of Theoden's flaws is that he just does not scale well with items, and I just don't think that's true. So I'd love to see some full gold Theodens running around and see what they can do. Honorable mention to Gandalf the Grey. This guy is not really that great in PvP. However, he does have particular matchups that he excels at, particularly against Witch King and Sunind. And in the metagame right now, you have to have a commander that can beat Sunind if you're playing good factions on RP servers, and there's any type of evil faction on your server. You have to be able to beat her, or she's just going to literally walk through all of your heroes. So Gandalf the Grey does get an honorable mention in that regard. My other honorable mention goes out to Éomer. I think this guy is a very, very strong commander. However, like with Theoden and Éowyn, he does require cavalry units, and this guy really starts to shine if and only if you have his unique weapon, and that's not feasible for every single person out there. And it's still not quite as good as Gimli's unique, in my opinion. It is very strong, don't get me wrong. The other thing about Éomer is that he needs high respect. He has a ton of extremely good skills, so it's more of like a whale honorable mention if you can push this guy to like respect 18 or 20 with a refined weapon. He's really going to start popping off. Because he runs cavalry, he doesn't have a super awesome matchup spread. However, it's not quite as polarizing as Faramir's, in my opinion. And there's just not a lot of people out there that are really running this guy fully wheeled out. They do exist, but he's not nearly as common as Gimli, for example. So while I do think Éomer is a good commander, he's just not quite as popular or prevalent as Gimli. Moving on to good faction T3s, we've had two fall from grace. That would be Galadriel and Gil-galad. Gil-galad is still quite a solid commander, and if you can snipe those non-pursuit matchups, he can be incredibly effective. However, so many people are running pursuit these days that it can be extremely risky to just send him in blind or throw him on a stack tile and wait to get hit. Still good overall, just not quite the absolute menace that he used to be. Galadriel, I just don't know what happened to her. Like, she's still pretty good against good factions. However, I think the rise in popularity of damage-dealing commanders has hurt her greatly because she tends to struggle against those. Potentially the rise of Grima, might make her a little bit weaker as well. There have been a ton of Grimas on my server, and that's a commander that she is notoriously weak against. It's just she doesn't perform like she used to. Again, she's not terrible, but she's just not a superstar these days, which brings me to the true superstars of good faction T3s. That would be Gandalf the White. I am biased in favor of this guy because I play with Karkiles, who has, in my opinion, the best Gandalf the White in the game. Don't at me for that. I will caveat Gandalf the White by saying that he does need Glamdring in order to reach his full potential, and since that requires Respect 10 plus on a T3 commander and 60 Golden Mithril, that's going to be out of reach for a lot of players. So if you're like a lower spender, I probably would opt away from Gandalf the White simply because he can do okay with a Mind Split in Old Order. He's barely passable in my opinion with a Smite Harbor. It's really when he gets Glamdring and that interaction comes online between Glamdring and the White, plus having all those extra skill points. He's just a he's a great commander for Whales because he has so much stuff going for him once you're able to unlock everything that you want. However, when you aren't able to unlock everything that you want, he's always just kind of missing one piece of the puzzle. Absolutely fantastic Whale Commander, one of the strongest in the game if you're able to invest in him. However, he does have a higher barrier to entry than most. If you're looking for somebody that can perform on a lower budget, I have to say that Dane would be your guy. This guy does an absolutely absurd amount of damage and really only needs Respect 5. Obviously, any commander is going to perform better with higher levels of respect. However, Respect 5 gets Dane what he wants, and because he's a Dwarven damage dealing commander, you don't have to like push him to R25 in order for him to start cranking out 250 to 300,000 damage. Very, very strong commander. His drawback is that he's like any other glass cannon in that he is not a particularly efficient commander. He's like a nuke. When you hit something, they're going to die, and you're going to die a lot too. And the rising star, in my opinion, for T3 good factions is Isildur. I don't remember where I ranked him the last time that I did a tier list video. However, next time I do one, and I might do one while I sit in Bag End, next time I do one, I'm definitely going to have to rate this guy higher. People have really figured out his skill tree, his item build, his troop compositions, etc., etc. And I have seen some absolutely just phenomenal reports from this guy against Sunind. And like I mentioned a few minutes ago, that is a super important thing in the current metagame. You have to be able to beat that commander if you are fighting evil factions. He also has builds that he can take on those glass cannon damage dealing commanders. So he has a pretty solid matchup spread in general. Interestingly enough, he seems to struggle against the Rohirrim commanders. However, as Sunind and glass cannons are gaining popularity, the Rohirrim commanders are declining in popularity, which makes Isildur sort of perfectly positioned in terms of who he is good against. Those commanders are becoming more and more popular. Therefore, Isildur has a much nicer spot in that he can really swing some of those fights heavily in his favor. The big drawback of Isildur is needing R5 on a T3, and you're going to need to be willing to switch your build around based on what you're fighting. And that could be switching everything from the skills, the items, and the troops. So he's not like a glass cannon that you can just throw a mono stack of guardians on and go to town. He is going to require some babysitting in terms of exactly how he is built in order for him to counter whatever you want him to counter at any given time. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Let me know what you think about my opinions on the current metagame, and thank you for watching.